My name is Jake, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about the different stages of financial independence and retire early. About 7 years ago, I was in a career where I knew that I couldn't be doing this forever. I knew that my job was ultimately going to probably be the end of me because it was so stressful. I remember back in 2018, I was thinking, okay, do I go and I buy a fancy car, or do I, take that money, invest it, and maybe I could retire or stop working a year or two earlier. And that, for me, that's when the light bulb hit, where I was like, oh wow, that's what it is. That's how it works. When I found out about the FIRE movement, I thought that there was only one path. I was thinking, okay, I work until I'm ready to retire, and then I go and I drink martinis, or I go hiking in the mountains, and I'm stress and worry free. Everyone's reality and perception of financial independence and what early retirement or financial independence, what that looks like, is unique to them, right? There's going to be clusters of ideas and clusters of ways that you can approach it. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's videos. There are clusters, there are different stages that you can go and you can approach. But I do want to share with you that I think most people, when they're looking to pursue financial independence and retire early, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I kind of have a hunch that most people go into this thinking that there's only one way, there's only one path, and that's to reach FIRE. They're not going to give up. They're going to work decades and decades, and they're going to penny pinch until they reach that goal of FIRE, and it's just one approach, right? And I think that is, I've learned from personal experience that that's not the reality, and that you really want to have a lot more flexibility baked into your planning. Maybe you've been pursuing financial independence for a couple of years and you're thinking, well, what other options are there? Maybe I don't want to work another 10 years. Maybe I don't want to grind out for another 20 years. What other options are there? And I want to walk through with you the different stages of financial independence and retire early. And I want to share who may be a good fit for each stage and what to kind of consider and think about if you want to pursue one stage versus another. And once you find out that financial independence and retire early is just not black and white, it's not one or the other, that there's many different ways that you can approach this, I hope that like me, I hope that you will have kind of a peace that comes over you when you realize that this is possible for your average person. You don't have to be a multimillionaire. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world to accomplish this, that it is possible for everyone. I hope that once you realize that, you have this calmness, this peace come over you. And I can speak from personal experience that peace that comes with it, it's the most amazing feeling in the world. And it feels a little like this.
The world is not in your books and maps. It's out there.
Friendly reminder, if you try and fail, congratulations. Most people don't even try.
Let's take a look at the very first stage. So there's going to be 5 stages to financial independence to retire early. These are the most mainstream. I'm sure there's other variations of what this may look like for someone else. And, but these are the clustered ideas or phases of how you can approach and how you can view financial independence and retire early. So the first one is going to be called regular FIRE. Right? This is kind of what you would assume to be the most, obvious approach when you're looking at this, where let's say, for example, you have annual expenses of $75,000 a year, and let's say that's, to cover all of your fixed expenses, your fixed and, kind of your variable expenses. Variable meaning kind of your gas bill, your food bill, your healthcare costs, etc. Right? And then if you want to reach regular FIRE, generally you would have a little bit more money on top so that you can enjoy discretionary things like traveling, vacationing, maybe going to a nicer restaurant on a birthday or on the holidays. you name it, right? So you have a buffer between what your fixed expenses are and what your budget is, right? So you can go above it so that you can enjoy a little bit more discretionary activities throughout the year, okay? And whether you're looking at this on a monthly basis or a yearly basis, that's really how you view it. There is a buffer. And so when you think about regular FIRE, what does that mean? Who should consider regular FIRE? So the first thing here is someone who is not in a rush to retire and they're looking for when the time is right. So they want to do this right. They're planning it very strategically. They're not really in a rush. Okay. And then the second thing, generally it's someone who is a high earner or, emphasis on the or has worked for a long period of time. Not everyone has to be a software engineer or a banker to be able to afford FIRE, right? It's, the kind of the levers. You're either a high net earner and you have a high savings rate, or, you don't and you have more of a middle income or an average income and you work for a little bit of a longer period of time, right? So that's important to understand. But generally it's somebody that either makes a lot of money or has worked for a longer period of time. And then the third thing here, I would call this person somebody that's trying to pursue regular FIRE. I would categorize this person as an optimizer. Someone who has optimized their lifestyle, their expenses, and their investments, right? Somebody that has, been optimizing their, what they're spending each month, each year on expenses. They're staying out of debt and they're trying to make more money. So this person, if you are trying to pursue regular FIRE, I would categorize you as an optimizer. Now let's take a look at the next one. So after regular FIRE, the next phase that we're going to look at is, or the next stage that we're going to look at is lean FIRE. So lean FIRE is, when you think about it, it's really just kind of bare bones. We'll use the example that I used earlier. Say your annual expenses are $75K. If you want to reach lean FIRE, that means that your portfolio or your investments are going to cover up to $75,000, but nothing more. So you don't have that buffer to spend on more discretionary items like travel, visiting, people, road trips, that's really the big difference there. So lean FIRE, the focus is on just covering your annual expenses. And when I think about lean FIRE, I think of somebody who, somebody that would want to pursue lean FIRE is someone that wants a simpler life, right? Maybe they live in a rural area where they live outside of the city. They don't have high expenses. They're really content with where they're at. They want to keep things simple. The next thing is, that they find enjoyment without spending money, right? Like they're content with nature. They're content with their environment. They don't have to go to a movie every other day and, spend lots of money. They don't really have to have the finer things in life. I think that really is important. It's not necessarily about how much you make, but how much you spend in many cases. It's not somebody that has to have a brand new car, a brand new iPhone every other year. It's not somebody that has to have, the nicest designer clothes. It's someone that's simple, right? And that they enjoy their family, they enjoy their private time. And I think that's really someone that would want to pursue lean FIRE. And then the last one here for lean FIRE is maybe you're unable due to a medical issue or something of that matter, family issue, or you're unwilling to stay in the rat race. You're unable to continue working. Maybe you get injured. You're unable to go to work anymore. Or maybe you have to take care of a family member or something happens to you. There's many things that can come in the way of being able to continue working. And maybe that's a reason to pursue a lifestyle or, a lean FIRE type approach to this. And everyone is in a different situation, right? So what your reality may be, it may be completely different for your neighbor. And somebody watching this in New York may have a completely different perspective from somebody that's in, Ohio or, in Michigan, in Grand Rapids, or wherever, right? One of the flyover states. Everyone is in a different situation, and you have to really decide for you what's right for you. The next one here is F.I.R.E. This is probably what you're going to hear the most from most people. This is the most appealing. This is the bells and whistles. This is like, you go on YouTube, everybody is talking about YouTube. Talking about FIRE on YouTube. There are a few minimalist lean fire channels on YouTube. I find those so much more interesting than the FIRE flashing the expensive car. They got rich quick over, with Bitcoin or something. Like, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It could be anything. But most content that you're going to see on YouTube is related to FIRE. And that's why I think what my gut tells me is that most people who are new to this, that are in their 20s, they see that as the only approach, that FIRE is the only way, and they're not going to consider anything else. And I think that's what can lead to a lot of unhappiness, because the reality is we're not all software engineers. We're not all making $300K a year. We're not all living in the city. We're not all healthy. We're not that's what can make this for the average person so challenging and so intimidating and quite frankly discouraging, because not everyone is in the same position. Okay. But regardless of if you are in the lucky percentile to be able to pursue FIRE, and if you're able to reach that, what FIRE is when we use the same example, your expenses are 75K and the buffer is just much greater than regular FIRE. FIRE, it's also subjective, right? There's no number behind it. This is subjective. FIRE, for someone, FIRE could be regular FIRE. For my neighbor, I'll give you a funny example. When I told my neighbor what my FIRE number was, he's like, "That's it?" I was like, "Yeah, that's it. I don't have high expenses." He's like, "Okay, cool." For him, FIRE, because he was expecting me to say like some large number, and I was like, "No, man, I don't need all that." But for me, I still consider that FIRE. So really quick, coming back to the example, 75K is your expenses. The buffer above that is just dramatically higher, right? And it's subjective. There's no one size fits all here. Let's say, for example, it's double that. You have 150K, so that you can go travel a couple of times a year. You can buy that brand new car if you need to, or you can up level, different areas of your life. You can spend money without, blinking an eye. Okay, so that's FIRE. And once again, I want to overemphasize that it is subjective, right? For me, FIRE looks very differently than my neighbor. And I'm sure that everyone out there is in a similar situation. So someone pursuing FIRE is someone who enjoys the finer things in life, right? They like the nicer things. They want to travel to Hawaii. They want to be able to live in, stay in the nice hotels, that kind of stuff. The second thing here is someone who is a high earner, or someone who has worked for decades, emphasis on the decades. You can reach FIRE in a short period of time if you're making 300K as a software engineer, or, in 7 or 10 years, or you may need 20 years or 30 years if you are a low earner, which is also very fine, right? It's fine. And then the last thing here is, this is someone that I would categorize is someone who can master delayed gratification. If you're not a high net earner, it's someone that can really be happy with delayed gratification. Now, I'm not talking about living on top ramen for 30 years. I'm talking about being able to live a lifestyle that, you're content with, but really delaying heavy expenses for an extended period of time. I think if that categorizes you, then FIRE is for you. But if you don't want to go decades, working at a grocery store or working, making 40K a year, you probably want to reevaluate if FIRE is for you. Okay. But at the end of the day, you have to make the decision that fits for you and what you are going to be the most, content with and happy with. Now, the next one here is Barista FIRE. Now, if you watched my last video, this is the one that I'm most excited about. Now, if you haven't watched the last video, I'd recommend watching that one where I talk about, my own personal experience, why we decided to do Barista FIRE for us. But I think with Barista FIRE, now, because this is the one that I'm living firsthand and experiencing live, I think I can add a lot more context to this one. So once again, 7 years ago, when I was first pursuing, financial independence, this never crossed my mind. This was never my goal, right? Like, this was never like 7 years ago, okay, I want to work so that, I can reach Barista FIRE. Okay, that was never the goal. But what is Barista FIRE? So let's use the example that we used earlier. 75K is the annual expenses. Now with Barista FIRE, you have part of that 75K in your investments, but there may be a little bit of a gap, right? There may be a gap. And let's say, for example, you have 60K or 70K in dividend income, but you still want a vacation, you still want to do other things. Well, you need that buffer. Okay. And so with Barista FIRE, generally you're going to take on some type of part-time work so that you can supplement the gap in income from where you're at. Okay. And you're supplementing that, whether it be in part-time work or, maybe seasonal work. It really can depend on many different things, but you're still working to supplement that gap. And coming back to my own story, 7 years ago, I never thought that, okay, that was my goal, but it wasn't until later when my lifestyle started changing. We had a baby, with all the fun stuff that comes with that, your life changes. And being kind of, realizing that, I'm just so grateful that we pivoted from our original goal, because it really brought a lot more happiness. I could not imagine continuing down the path of FIRE given where I'm at right now. So I hope that, if you're in a similar situation, that you understand that and that it is possible, right? So the first thing here, for somebody to consider Barista FIRE, this is someone who has been working in a career or been working for a while, but they're looking for maybe something different, right? Maybe they've been in their career for a while and they want to, pursue other passions, other careers, or other things. And then the second thing is they're looking to downshift their lives, right? They want to change their career path. They want to maybe not work 5 days a week. Maybe they want to work 3 or 2 days a week, and they want to focus on something that they really enjoy. Maybe not taking the job that pays the most, but something that you don't dread on a Monday morning, right? Something that you look forward to, or you actually genuinely enjoy. And then the third thing here is maybe it's someone that wants to learn a new skill, or enjoys change, or enjoys the challenge. Maybe you have to learn something new, a new craft or something, and maybe you get bored after a year and you just need to change things up a little bit. This is maybe something for you, or for somebody that is kind of with this personality type. But all in all, one of the big benefits of Barista FIRE is it adds a lot more flexibility in your life, and it gives you a lot more options than working a full-time job where you're stuck, right? It kind of frees you from that. Once again, if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can watch my last video. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking more and more about this. The last one here is Coast FIRE. Not a lot of people talk about this, but I think it's really interesting. So Coast FIRE is kind of like, when you're driving in a car and you're coasting, and really when you think about Coast FIRE, think about compounding, where you work up front, you put all the effort and time up front, and in the background, it's then coasting in the background, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, in the first couple of years of your career, let's say you invest heavily into a 401k, right? A Roth 401k and in your Roth IRA. Those are retirement accounts that you're not generally going to touch until you're 60 years old. So let's say you're 20 and you work for 5 years and you invest all of your money into a retirement account until you're 25. And let's say you really worked hard and you maxed out your retirement accounts. And let's say after 5 years, you have, $150,000 or $200,000 in your retirement accounts. Now, what you can do is you have that big lump sum of money. You've invested a lot of time and effort into it, but you don't want to continue doing that. What you can do is you can let that coast in the background and let it compound naturally over the next 20, 25, 35 years. So to kind of visualize this, let me use this example here. Let's use it with a compound interest calculator. Let's say, for example, you did reach that $200,000 target, right? You worked your butt off for a handful of years and you have that money sitting in a retirement account. Now, it doesn't have to be in a retirement account. This could be in a taxable account just as well, right? So don't get over fixated on one account type, okay? So let's say you got $200,000 in this account, and let's say you want it to grow for the next 30 years. Let's say an example, I don't want to overdo the examples, but let's say you're 30 years old and you've reached $200,000. If you were to let this sit until you're 60 years old at a compound rate of 8%, which is conservative, if you're invested into, the total US stock market like VTI, you can expect an 8%. If you were to do that over a 30-year time period, you could reasonably assume that this portfolio would compound and grow to $2 million, roughly, okay? Now, the emphasis here is on the more time that you have, the more you could take advantage of the compounding that comes with it, okay? And so this is what it means to coast FIRE. Here you've worked in your 20s and now you've reached it and you set it into an account and you don't touch it and you just let it compound in the background. So that's what it means with coast FIRE, and there's different ways that you can approach this. There's not one size fits all. So you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between Barista FIRE and coast FIRE if you're still working? So the difference is with Barista FIRE, you're actually taking your investments and you're paying for your living expenses. Whereas with coast FIRE, you're not touching your investments. You're investing or sitting there and they're compounding over time. So that's important. Don't get confused, because with Barista FIRE, you're still working, and with coast FIRE, you're still working, but the difference is what you're doing with your investments. So somebody that would want to consider coast FIRE, somebody that enjoys their career, they like what they're doing, they like working, they want to continue doing what they're doing, and that's really a priority of theirs. They really love working, right? And then the second thing is that maybe, somebody that has, once they've reached their goal of the money that they need in order for it to compound, they want to change their career paths once they've reached it, right? So say, for example, you're in a high stress environment. Let's say you're a software engineer and you're working for, 5 or 10 years, but you still want to keep working, right? You don't want to sit on the beach all day. You want to stay busy. Well, you could reach coast FIRE in your retirement account. You could then take a less stressful job, still work full time, still go and travel and do all those things, but you don't have to aggressively invest into your retirement accounts. You see the difference there? If you're not investing $20K into your 401k on a yearly basis, that's a lot of money that you could take and go and fund for, discretionary things. If you really like cars, you could take that money and instead of traveling and investing in your 401k, you could buy a new car. You could buy a new house. Like, there's a lot more things that you could do and you could enjoy. And I think if you're young and you're early in your career, that might sound like maybe a really appealing thing. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing here is someone who's generally younger and has time for their investments to compound. So this is not something for somebody in their 60s or their 50s or in their late 40s, okay? It's generally not for somebody like that. This is more for somebody that's in their early 20s, maybe their early 30s, who has time for their investments to compound, because that's contingent, it's contingent entirely on, compounding. And in order for that to work, you have to have time. So those are the stages of financial independence to retire early. What I think is really important to mention is that as your priorities and as things in your life change, it's important to remember that, you may need to mix things up. You may need to be adaptable to what's going on in your life. When I first started FIRE, I had no idea that how difficult it would be to have a toddler running around screaming in the morning, throwing a tantrum before you wanted to record a YouTube video. I had no idea that that was going to be a thing. I had no idea that my back was going to start hurting and my knees were going to start hurting in my 30s, right? Like, life happens, but the important message here is to understand, educate yourself, understand what's available, what's out there, set a goal and work towards that goal. Do everything that you can to optimize it, to make it work for your particular situation. But remember, just like in college or in anything else in life, if you have to change your major, that it's okay. It's okay to change course in life and to not feel bad about where you're at. The important thing is to make decisions based off of what your understanding is at the time and being content with those decisions and being flexible should things in your life change. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see everybody in next week's video.
Please subscribe. Please subscribe.
You know what? I think we're gonna be friends. Can everyone say hi to my friend? That's crazy. I just wanted to say thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.